LSU quarterback Colin Hurley involved in a scary car crash. We have the latest. It's Locked on LSU. Let's go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free, available wherever you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. And as always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. One NFL draft analyst has Will Campbell going number 3 overall. You'll hear the explanation and maybe a sleeper Tiger that might creep his way into round 1. You'll hear that coming up in just a bit. 2 former Tigers dismissed from Brian Kelly's staff. I got some thoughts. But we'll start today's show with some scary and still somewhat perplexing news as more details are still coming out. LSU freshman quarterback Colin Hurley was hospitalized early Thursday after being involved in a car crash. The information that has come out so far has been sparing, to say the least, but we'll catch you up on what we know, talk a little bit about what that means at quarterback. So this was around 2:45 a.m. Wednesday night into Thursday morning. Colin Hurley, who was driving a red Dodge Charger with Florida plates, crashed into a tree on LSU's campus. If you're familiar with the campus, this was at South Quad and Highland Road. So the road that runs South Quad that hits Highland Road, there's a big messy intersection where several roads converge there, and Hurley apparently hit a tree with his Dodge Charger. A passerby noticed, called 911. Police arrived, attempted to get Hurley out of the vehicle. He was unresponsive. That was part of the initial report from WBRZ, and then later confirmed. At that time, Baton Rouge Fire Department members arrived, and they were able to get Hurley out of the vehicle. So he was unresponsive, but he was breathing. And I think we see that term sometimes, unresponsive, and maybe think the worst. But unresponsive could simply mean you're trying to talk to him and he's not responding to you, but conscious. They said he was in and out of consciousness, but he was breathing. And when EMS arrived, because he was unresponsive and he had a large gash on his face, they took Colin Hurley to Our Lady of the Lake Hospital, where he was evaluated and kept. Now, there's no word from LSU initially, but late Thursday afternoon, LSU did release a statement from the Hurley family. And it should also be mentioned that because Colin Hurley is 17, his father was notified at the time of the crash. So Hurley, who's from Jacksonville, Hurley's family made this statement. It's a few lines. I'll read it to you. Colin would like to thank the first responders, the incredible doctors and nurses at Our Lady of the Lake Health, and the many Tiger fans for their care and compassion. Colin is resting and is stable while more tests and care are being administered. We are confident Colin will make a full recovery from this terrible accident. Go Tigers, the Hurley family. So that's great to know that they expect him to make a full recovery. It doesn't appear that any injuries would be lasting or too significant. And it is worth noting that authorities determined there was no indication that the driver, Colin Hurley, was impaired at the time of the crash. No indication that he was impaired at the time of the crash. Should also be noted there was no one else in the vehicle, that he was the lone passenger in the vehicle. And he was the driver. So that's the story. And I don't want to editorialize because, first of all, it's a scary accident. We're still learning more about what happened, what might have caused it. And Colin Hurley, I'm sure at some point will be able to speak on it. It is worth mentioning that, as the internet might do, a photo circulated of Colin Hurley on Thursday, allegedly at Murphy's, which is a bar off of LSU's campus. And one of the captions noted that Hurley had been consuming alcohol. I am only stating this for the record. I want to be very clear. I am not implying that this is a fact. I am only stating this for the record because a lot of people have mentioned this today. To be very clear, as of now, I don't believe there's any confirmation that the photo that circled was from Wednesday night, Thursday morning. There's also no evidence in the photo that Colin Hurley was consuming alcohol. And the first responders determined that there was no sign that he was impaired. Now, what could that be? Well, obviously, he couldn't speak to it, but if there were no maybe cups in the car or alcohol in the car, maybe he didn't smell of alcohol, any number of things that could have been determined to have been signs that he was impaired. That they didn't notice that. It's not to say he wasn't. It's not to say he was. I simply don't know, and we don't have enough information. And I only say that for the record because people are talking about it. There's a photo that's circulating, and I figured to talk about the story in total, you have to at least address that. So to be very clear, at this point, we don't know. We don't know the answer to that. But I think the most important thing is that Colin Hurley appears okay. This is a young guy who's 17 years old. I think most people know Colin Hurley's story, but he's a guy that not only enrolled early at LSU, but also reclassified, meaning he enrolled at LSU a year and a half early, basically at the midway point of his junior year of high school. He was 16 when he showed up at LSU's campus last spring. He did not see any game action in 2024, took a red shirt. And, it's interesting, while clearly the vastly more important part of this story is that Colin Hurley is okay. There is a football component of it, and we're a sports show, so we will address that. But this is a big time for Colin Hurley. Garrett Nussmeier is returning, but Ricky Collins and A.J. Swan are both gone to the transfer portal. And LSU brought in Michael Van Buren, who, again, just finished his freshman year. Now, he was at Mississippi State, and he became the starter for the bulk of the season after Mississippi State quarterback Blake Shapen was injured and lost for the season. So it's just worth noting that LSU, after losing Ricky Collins and A.J. Swan, went to the portal to get a young veteran who could be an experienced veteran to back up Nussmeier and then potentially have the opportunity to win the job in 2026. But it's also safe to say that Van Buren and Colin Hurley are each 1 year into their college career. Now, Van Buren's played more, and he's a year older, but they're certainly both good. But Hurley has the advantage of having been in Baton Rouge in the LSU system, and he's certainly a physically developed young guy. So this is a big spring because Colin Hurley could, if he plays well, why not win the backup job behind Garrett Nussmeier? It's certainly not going to be given to Michael Van Buren. It would stand to reason he would have the inside track, having played, having started games in the SEC. Well, Colin Hurley didn't take a snap, but it's a big spring for Colin Hurley. So here's hoping that there wasn't anything nefarious, that it was hopefully just an unfortunate accident, and thankful that he is okay. But as that story develops, we'll certainly continue to talk about it here and keep you posted because, Hurley's a guy with a lot on the line this spring for LSU. So to a quick recovery, thankful that he's okay. And as we have more information, we'll certainly pass it on. Well, while Colin Hurley recovers, 2 former LSU Tigers are no longer on Brian Kelly's staff. What a weird news day it was on Thursday around LSU football. We'll continue locked on LSU, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings, Prize Picks has changed the game in daily fantasy sports. Whether it's playoffs or regular season, Prize Picks has made it easier than ever to win big while enjoying all the football action. Now, It's playoff time. And there's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks. So here's how it works. You simply pick more or less on at least 2 players. And if your picks hit, you could win up to 1,000 times your cash. Yes, that is right. 1,000 times your money just by making a few simple picks. If you're ready to run your game this football season, download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 just for playing. Be sure to use the code LOCKEDONCollege. Don't wait. Take your game to the next level with Prize Picks. Prize Picks, run your game. Well, certainly a very scary day around the accident with Colin Hurley. Bit of a head-scratching day for 2 former LSU Tigers. Nick Brossette and JaCoby Stevens are no longer part of Brian Kelly's staff at LSU. At LouisianaSports.net, I know Hunt Palmer was among the first, if not the first, to report that Brossette and Stevens both would be gone and would not return to LSU. Let me go kind of chronologically because we learned the Brossette news first, and then we learned the JaCoby Stevens news. So just as a catch-up, if you're not familiar or if you don't remember Nick Brossette, Brossette played in high school at the lab school at U High on LSU's campus. And when he finished his high school career, he was Louisiana's high school all-time touchdown leader. Had a great career at U High. Comes to LSU and is backing up Leonard Fournette and Darius Geis. So Darrell Williams was there as well, by the way. So 3 NFL running backs were ahead of him. So he just patiently sat and waited his turn. Had an unfortunate ACL injury also. But in 2018, his final season in Baton Rouge, Brossette had the chance to be a starter, and he played alongside Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And Brossette had a 1,000-yard season in his final year in Baton Rouge, ran for 14 touchdowns in 2018, that team that went on to win the Fiesta Bowl over UCF. Brossette didn't really have a professional career. In 2019, he spent training camp with the Patriots and then also with the Lions. He would spend the 2020 season in the XFL with the DC Defenders. The league would fold after 2020. Of course, it was the COVID year. And Nick Brossette's playing career was done. Well, Brian Kelly was hired in 2022. And when he was hired, he brought Nick Brossette on LSU staff. And he was hired on staff as the director of alumni relations. And, you know, his role was just that, was to sort of engage former LSU football players in the program. And whenever I see an off-field support staff member let go, it's always a bit head-scratching. Now, I want to be very clear. Nick hasn't spoken. I will tell you that at LouisianaSports.net, one of our staff members reached out to Nick on Thursday. Nick was offered the opportunity to provide a comment, and he declined that opportunity. I understand that. If so let go by his alma mater and is not ready to speak on it, that's fine. When the day and time comes, he can do that to tell his story or whatever happened, should he want to do that, or maybe he doesn't. We'll see what happens as time passes. But the truth is, and I've been in media since 2003, in 22 years. I mean, I'm 42 years old. I started when I was 20. So I'm 22 years into this industry, and I've covered LSU on a daily basis since 2007. It's been a long time, and I've been around this program a long time, and 3 different head coaches now. And anyway, all that to say, I've seen a lot of staff changes, on-field staff changes, head coaching, assistants, support staff, recruiting coordinators, general managers, all the stuff, and different circumstances surrounding a lot of those moves. But one thing that's certainly true is lower level support staff members, and I don't have a better way to say that. I don't mean for that to sound insulting, like the job isn't important or significant, but it's not like your coordinator who's being paid 1.8, you finish 82nd in the country in total offense, so there's consequences and he gets fired. Like, that happens. when you're talking about like low-level off-field support staff members, they don't get fired for performance reasons. It's not like Nick wasn't doing a great job engaging the alumni, so we figured we could find someone else who we'd pay a low salary to be on staff to make calls to alumni and invite him to events. Like, that's not really how that works, and I think you understand what I mean. So when I saw that Nick Brossette had been let go, I mean, it raised a red flag to say something's not right there. And I don't know the answer, and I don't have the story. And I'm not saying Nick did anything wrong. I don't know what happened there. I'm just saying it's not like Nick was supposed to make 50 alumni calls in December and he made 38. And so they fired him because he's not doing his job. Like, that's not exactly how that works. If you pay a defensive coordinator $2 million, if you're Bo Pelini and you bring in Bo Pelini and you have the worst defense in the history of the program in 2020 and he's gone after a year, it's performance-based. This doesn't feel like that. Now, I also know, in full disclosure, as many of you have seen this circulate on the internet, there was a Facebook post about an alleged interaction that Nick Brossette had with the owner of a gate and fence company in Gonzales. And, you know, I hesitate to say this because this is one person's side of the story. Nick hasn't spoken on it. But what I can tell you is this man alleged in this Facebook post that he refused service to Nick Brossette, and Nick Brossette didn't behave in a proper manner. Let's put it that way. I did reach out to the person who made the post and found out that the post was actually at the beginning of September. So you're talking about 4 months ago. So so as this circulates, I doubt very seriously that LSU's maybe firing Nick Brossette because of a Facebook post from 4 months ago. I guess it's possible that they just learned about it, like many might have, but I don't know. It's something that we're going to have to follow. And hopefully Nick will have his day to speak and we'll find out what happened. But the reason I brought up that Facebook post is very similar to why I brought up the photo of Colin Hurley earlier. It's not that it's incriminating in any way. It's just to address it because it's out there. A lot of people are talking about it. And it's to say that because there is no timestamp on the screenshot, the post is not available right now. So a lot of people are passing around a screenshot. And I reached out to the person responsible for that post and was told that post was from September the 3rd of 2024. So it's not like it was something that happened yesterday. Brian Kelly got wind of it and fired Nick Brossette. That's not how this went down. So as that continues to develop, we'll certainly tell you more as we get more. And then later in the day on Thursday, we learned that JaCoby Stevens is also no longer with the LSU football team. And this is a little more interesting because Stevens, of course, was a 5-star from the state of Tennessee who came to LSU, was a real key contributor on the 2019 national championship team. Played his senior season at LSU in 2020. He started all 15 games in 2019 as a junior. In 2020, started all 10 games during the COVID year. Actually led the team in tackles that year. Then went off to the NFL, had a short-lived NFL career, and came back and joined the LSU football staff. And while his role was his official title with LSU was recruiting specialist, so working sort of in a recruiting role on the recruiting staff, JaCoby also was on the field. I'll remind you now that analysts and GAs and support staff members can work on the field. And my assumption always was that JaCoby had an ambition to be, or has an ambition to be, a coach. And he would go out there and work with the defensive backs and sometimes over at the linebackers. He was a common fixture at practice, and you would see him on the sideline at games as well. But this is another one of those where he's not being paid an exorbitant salary. It's an entry-level opportunity for a guy like that to get more experience. And so when someone like that is dismissed, not returning without explanation, it makes you wonder why. So I understand that it's a time where, it's a dead period in recruiting. The coaches convention was earlier this week. The transfer portal is closed. So the news cycle around most every college football program, except for the two teams that are going to play in the national championship game on Monday, the news cycle isn't really robust right now. So stories like this maybe get a little more attention than they otherwise would at a different time of year. But something's going on there where a couple of former Tigers are dismissed on the same day and there's no explanation given and they don't speak on it. It makes you wonder. So we'll follow it. And as we learn more, we'll certainly continue to let you know. One thing's for certain as well is that Will Campbell's LSU career is over, and he is about to become a very, very wealthy young guy. You will hear what one draft analyst told me about Will Campbell, and by the way, a potential sleeper first-round pick from the Tigers. Stay here. It's Locked on LSU, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate. The variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team, just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. How about JD5 and the Commanders taking on the Lions? Gobble up all them points with JD5, y'all. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. As we wrap up today's episode of Locked on LSU, it's a little too early to really roll up our sleeves and get too deep into the NFL draft. After all, round one of the draft isn't until Thursday, April the 24th. So we're talking about 3 months, a little more than 3 months actually, before the draft. We've got Combine. Of course, we'll have the Senior Bowl. We'll have Combine, pro days, and the whole pre-draft process to go through. It a lot will change, but I did find this interesting as the season has ended for all but the 8 teams that remain in the divisional round of the NFL playoffs. So by and large, we know bulk of the draft order, and 24 of the 32 NFL teams are either hiring coaches or starting to focus on the offseason, free agency, and the draft. And so you're seeing a lot of mock drafts. And Chris Trapasso has been a friend, a colleague for a while. He's the draft analyst over at CBS Sports. And he put out a mock draft this week. And he has Will Campbell going number 3 overall to the Tennessee Titans. He had a couple of trades at the top of the draft with the Giants and the Browns going, Giants going up to 1, Browns at 2, taking quarterbacks, Titans sliding back to 3, where they take Will Campbell, number 3 overall. And I asked Chris why, with Kelvin Banks getting a lot of love from Texas, why he had Will Campbell going number 3 overall in the first non-quarterback taken off the board.
I mean, this one is going to be I think consensus. You can have 50 other draft analysts on, and they're all going to say Will Campbell is the best blocker in this class. Just 3 straight years of steady play. Looked like a first-rounder when he was a freshman. Never regressed from that. He looks under control. The balance that he plays with in pass protection, he's nasty as a run blocker. He just needs to get a little stronger, which is the case for 99% of any offensive lineman coming into the league, especially younger ones. The one other LSU player that I don't have in this mock that I might have, because I just finished my grade on him, Braden Swinson was tremendous on film. I know he's a little bit older, was a transfer from Oregon, but the bend, the tenacity, hustle, the pass rush moves, the length, I think the pre-draft process, his measurables are going to make a big difference. But on film, he looks like a first-round caliber player to me. And usually in the back portion of the draft, those teams don't need quarterbacks. They usually have pretty solid wide receiver groups. Those edge rushers can be that final piece of the puzzle for those teams picking, from 25 to 32. Braden Swinson is the other one that I think could ultimately go in round 1 from LSU.
Really interesting test case when you think about it. Swinson's a guy, as you heard Chris say, started his career, played 3 years at Oregon, and then played the last 2 at LSU. So he played 5 collegiate seasons, 55 games, 55 collegiate games, just 14 starts, but 55 collegiate games. And my goodness, did he pop off this year with 8.5 sacks and 13 TFLs. Just for comparison, before this season, in his previous 4 collegiate years, Braden Swinson had 5 sacks total. He had 8.5 this year. Before this year, Braden Swinson had 12 TFLs in 4 years. He had 13 TFLs this season. So, yeah, man, he's a guy that came back for his 5th season and took advantage of the COVID year. And boy, did he ever make the most of it, and might have made himself a good bit of money. It's interesting just because it's not too long ago in college football where guys were just 3 into the league. It's just how they went. They went to go start that NFL clock. Now, especially with NIL, guys can make money staying in college, continuing to improve and get better, and potentially increasing their draft stock, just like Braden Swinson did. I mean, you heard Chris say it. A year ago, Braden Swinson started just 1 game for LSU. Played in 12, but started just 1 time. Had 6.5 TFLs and 2 sacks. He was a situational rusher. He proved he could be an every down player. He finished with a 58 tackles on the season. I just shared the TFL and sack numbers for you and proved that maybe he could be an every down guy in the NFL. So made himself an awful lot of money this season, which is really cool to see. LSU last year had the 3 first-rounders with Jaden, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas. Mason Smith went 48th overall. Jordan Jefferson, Mekhi Wingo went rounds 4 and 6, respectively. The year before, B.J. Ojolari, Anthony Bradford, Jay Ward, Jay Roy, Kayshawn Booty, Jark Bernard Converse, all drafted. I think LSU in this year's draft, while Will Campbell might be the only first-rounder, and of course, a lot of us were expecting Garrett Nussmeier, Harold Perkins to come out this year, Emory Jones potentially to be a first-rounder. But it may end up only being Campbell. But the total number of players taken in this year's draft from LSU could exceed the last 2, even though LSU didn't have this great year with top-level talent, like the 3 first-rounders a year ago from the offense. Will Campbell, Emory Jones, Mason Taylor. Remains to see what may happen with Kyron Lacey. Of course, Kyron would have been a draftable player, but we'll see now with the charges he's facing. Miles Frazier, Garrett Dellinger, both could be draftable guys. Defensively, Braden Swinson, Savion Jones, Greg Penn, Zy Alexander could all hear their names called. So that's 10 players right there that I just rattled off. While it may not be a draft that's very top-heavy for LSU players, maybe a deep draft where a lot of the guys that stayed a long time in college and played a lot of football for LSU, guys like Lacey and Frazier and Dellinger and Swinson and Jones and Penn and Zy. Those are all seniors, veteran guys that played 4 or 5 years. In some instances, it was 6. Maybe an interesting opportunity to see if those guys go in the draft, even though they are a bit older. So we'll keep tabs on it as we get closer to the draft in April. But I thought you'd like to hear that about what Chris had to say about Will Campbell, number 3 overall. All right, that'll do it for us here in today's episode of Locked On LSU. Thanks so much for making it your first listen. Now for your second listen, how about you go check out our guy Chris Gordy. Shout out LSU. On Locked On LSU, on Locked On SEC, on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. If you're on podcast, please subscribe here on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video. As always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below and let a friend know they love the Tigers. We got you every single day for Locked On LSU, your team every day.